All right, so what do we think of the movie so far? What do we see that pertains to gender in total?
I mean, it wasn't expected a mystery, but I was pleasantly surprised. It's really well written.
Yeah, well, I sort of set you up in the wrong way by saying this is the French Wes Anderson, because we're all expecting Wes Anderson now. But.
Have we seen any female nurses yet? I don't think so.
Just in Gallipoli, the ones in the blue dresses that were very peripheral.
Okay.
They were at the party, and then they were at the, Mel Gibson talks to a couple of them near the pyramids when he gets his new light horse uniform. But other than that, no, we haven't seen any nurses yet.
We had Tina dressing up as a nun.
Yeah, we have Tina as a nun. We will, there is a brief scene at a field dressing station with nurses, which is sufficiently bizarre to be strange. But any other thoughts on the film? One thing that I really like about this film, which is it takes one of the central aspects of World War I, which is that the people at the front could not communicate to anybody else what it was like. You see that all across the Western Front. You know, Paul goes back home and he can't even stay there because he can't talk to anybody because nobody understands what he's gone through. And this movie turns it into a mystery that the female character has to figure out what happened at the front, but she can't. It's all a mystery. It's all opaque. And so the sort of central mystery is what happened, and so it takes the sort of central idea that European society had been wrestling with, which is how veterans can't communicate what they've gone through, and it turns it into sort of an interesting mystery.
I think it's interesting how this focuses around the female view of the war and with the similarities and differences between I just blank on the protagonist's name again.
Mathilde?
Yes. Between Mathilde and Tina, and how they a middle class woman and then a prostitute dealt with it both similarly and very differently.
Mm-hmm.
And how they're both especially Mathilde is she wants information, but it's kind of too much for her fragile woman's heart, and so it's nobody's telling her anything, and I think that's an interesting perspective of it's not just the men who can't, it's not just the soldiers who can't tell anybody what it's like, but it's also the civilians who can't find out what it's like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kind of along that same line, I think that I don't remember the specific wife's name, but the one who slept with her husband or husband's friend.
Yeah.
I think that that's really interesting because it truly shows how badly the people on the front wanted to not be there.
Yeah.
That he was I will literally let you sleep with my friend to hopefully get you pregnant so that I can come home and not have to be there.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting storyline.
Mm-hmm. I'm not aware of that ever actually happening in real life, but yeah, Elena.
It's also interesting, the way that, if you think about it, the way that Tina versus the way that Mathilde deal with the situation, they're kind of just using their resources. Mathilde is able to go and see a lawyer, and she's able to go to this
hire
big,
private detective.
Yeah, a library, and have all of these things, and Tina is just doing what she can, seducing the men or getting them to come to the brothel or whatever and killing them.
Yeah. Got it.
The glasses gun was really creative.
I mean, this movie is full of just bizarre little things like that. It's why did you think that was necessary to put in here? But it kind of makes the movie. And I mean, the scene at the dressing station is even more batshit crazy. So, what do you guys think of Manek?
He's cute. He's so cute.
He's cute, yes. Is he masculine?
No.
Who's in the neck again?
The guy she's trying to
Her
find.
fiance. Not to the like World War I standard, I think especially because he keeps carving the MMN, which we find out means Manek marries Matilde. So him running around carving that around is kind of giving him a like more feminine feel.
It's actually a pun. What they actually said in the movie is Manek and Mathilde. And they're writing M as M.
Oh.
So it's a joke. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, he's running around. Sorry, I assume.
Yeah, he's just like running around and he's like, I don't know. They like, especially with the way that he was the only one to self-mutilate but actually got shot by an
By German.
opposing side.
Yeah.
It just doesn't paint him as the most masculine person there.
I wonder like how accurate if that like if somebody could actually like if a soldier could actually kind of act the way that he was acting, because like he was a little bit. I kind of feel like the main like the defining characteristic about him is that he's in love with Mathilde. And like I feel like soldiers having like girlfriends or fiancés or wives back home was like kind of just an established thing, but being like that almost obsessed with getting back to her, I feel like would have just been like frowned upon and shunned. And like I'm not sure if he'd actually been able to like be that public about that he just really wants to get back to her and get married to her.
Well, they're also like best friends.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, they met as kids before, anything sexual. Yeah. I think this metaphor works frequently with these kinds of films, but I think he's a non-player character. He's just there so that he's a foil for her. She's the main character, and he's just sort of there as the old literary people have a term, the MacGuffin, which is the thing in a movie that everybody's trying to get, like the plans to the Death Star or the, whatever. It's a MacGuffin. It's the thing that you've got to find, and everybody's fighting over getting it. He's the MacGuffin, he's just the thing everybody's striving for to land.
He's like Harvey in Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Like Harvey's character like only exists to be Sabrina's boyfriend.
That's so specific.
Or Ken, for that matter.
Yeah, well, and it also in that way is kind of like inverting the gender roles of the time, because like in their relationship, the masculine, the man, is this really passive object of like, he's like truly just in the film an object for her to discover. And like she has become this like really active actor, like traveling around, like communicating with a bunch of people, like being really forceful with like she's really like assertive with like when she, I'm thinking, I didn't see like the middle part, but at the beginning when she meets with the private detective, she's like really assertive with him and like won't let, even though she's like can't walk right because of her polio and stuff, like she's really assertive with him and like, no, you will be doing it. Like she's not letting him like kind of push her around at all.
Yeah, and I mean, this is one of the interesting things about this film. Is it's a war movie, and the main character is a non-combatant female, and the combatants are all just sort of there, right? I mean, some of them have character, Ange Bassignano or Biscuit and Benjamin Gordas, but they're minor characters. The main character is a non-combatant.
He's basically just a damsel in distress. Like, the background just.
Okay, let me throw out go ahead.
Well, and I also think her surviving the polio kind of adds to her filling the masculine role, because it proves that she can survive something that a lot of people did not at the time.
Yeah, that's true. Let me throw out an idea. Manek is Christ.
Well, the film opens with Christ. That's the like big note I had. Like it literally, the opening shot is Christ dangling off the crucifix.
Right, at bingo crepuscule, presumably. Christ has holes in his hands because he was nailed to the cross, and Manek has a hole in his hand, and he's identified the whole way through as the red mitten over the hole in his hand. He has malice towards none. He is saintly in his, love for Manek. He bears everything. I think he's a Christ figure, but I have no idea what the symbolism of having Christ in that role is.
Yeah, that is a very interesting Christ, because like normally with like Christ figures, there's some sort of like rising or there's the like ending of the movie will be interesting to see like how they type the storyline, because like normally there's some sort of like hope or like bursting open of like there's something that Christ accomplishes like as a Christ figure,
Yeah.
even like as a passive one.
You missed it yesterday, but there was a soldier who came and explained to Matilda that he allegedly saw all of them die, and he got shot by an airplane. Like a gunner on an airplane. They looked like 11 just got shot, so.
Yeah, but he's gonna come back in 3 days.
Yeah, of course he's gonna come back, but.
So I can see the analogy being that like he's supposedly dead and he'll rise again
Yeah.
if Matilde finds him. But I think he also like establishes hope for Matilde in a way, and more analogy into the Christ-like figure. Like other soldiers who were there have no belief in him and no belief that he'll establish himself again. But the people who, you know, the people who are closest to him and believe in him the most really want him to be back.
I don't think this is what the filmmakers were intending, but it could be a little bit of like a satirical sort of thing of like Christ was one of the most, if not the most, influential person in history out of like all of Dakota's history basically. And so, but then it's like the Christ figure in this movie is acting completely like unmanly, and so it might be like a, I don't think this is what they were intending, but it could be read as like a kind of critique of masculinity then, of like the you know, the person who got dubbed the son of God wouldn't have been masculine enough by like those standards. So it could be kind of a little bit of like making fun of bourgeois masculinity a little bit.
Okay, why?
Perhaps I'm overthinking this a little bit, but I know like very early adoptions of depictions of Christ, when they were trying to blend what he actually looked like with like Roman tradition, because it was still relatively new, they were picking, you know, Jupiter and other gods, and he came off as very feminine looking. And this almost like non-sex related between female or male, he was just sort of this sort of figure. And so like, I mean, there could be a connection there. I don't know, you know, if it's loose or not, but.
Yeah. I mean, certainly my neck is non-violent. He doesn't shoot anybody in the war, and he flips out. I mean, when the guy gets blown up all over him, you know, he clearly loses his mind. But so he's also non-violent, which is sort of the opposite of wartime masculinity. Any other thoughts? How do you think it's going to end?
He's coming back.
You think he survived No Man's Land?
Mm-hmm.
You think she's gonna roll back the door of the,
The
tomb
tomb,
and he's
yeah.
gonna emerge?
She's gonna get there first.
I hope he doesn't get in the tomb for that long.
3 days and 2 nights is all it takes.
Yeah, well, this is 2.5 years at this point,
I
so.
hope Matilda at least gets some closure in the end and they wrap that up nicely.
Okay.
Trying to remember what kind of gunshot Monic sustained. Part of his body looked like lower abdomen.
I think it was like it's somewhere here to here on the left side, 50 caliber machine gun, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's-
If it hit his pelvis, he's done for, but I mean, I suppose it could have been a through and through.
Clean.
Yeah.
Who knows? Gunshots aren't
I don't think you're gonna survive a gut shot like that.
But it was fairly, I mean, the bullet, I mean, their blood explosion was fairly far with the left, so it could have been a through and through the abdominal muscles or something, but it also could have been, you know, right through the stomach. Sepsis, who knows? Any other thoughts on any aspects of it? The whole story of, you know, the two guys, the guy asking his best friend to sleep with his wife to have a sixth child. Okay, good. Listen.
I feel like that is like the thing with the sixth child is interesting, and I wouldn't be surprised if they return to it, but I also wouldn't be surprised if like that was just a one-time thing. I think the woman's gonna come back, but maybe not a visual.
Okay.
I mean, because it seemed like they were going to the point where the husband in that situation and survived, because it was like, oh, this big guy was carrying this guy. Oh wait, at the field hospital, and then that's kind of where we ended. But I mean, maybe they're both alive. I don't know.
Well, I will say at least one of the 5 people sent over the top does survive.
I feel like we have a short list of people who are definitely dead,
Yes.
so we can narrow that down a little bit.
Yes, I think Ange Bassignat, or whatever his name is dead. I said Sicilian yesterday. It's Corsican. I'm sorry. He's Corsican. Tina's.
He was the one who was yelling that he's not French, he's Corsican,
Right.
and
Exactly.
then got shot by the French.
Right. And then I don't know if you made the connection, but the guy who shot him was the one that Tina Lombardi
Yeah.
killed with the funky gun at assembly. Well, let's start talking about. Oh, go ahead. One more
I just
thing.
want to put this out there. Tina is just fun to watch for me. Like, she's so unhinged.
Yes.
And it's just like she literally killed an officer by getting him in bed with her and then shooting the ceiling.
Yes.
The glass falling, like.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just crazy.
That was kind of funny that when she started talking, Matilda, and she was like, "They're gonna give me a bull cut. I'm gonna like Joan of Arc when they execute you." And I was like, "Why are you bringing that up? What's the purpose of that?"
She wants to stay hot until the end.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
so. I was like, "Oh, okay."
Any other thoughts on the movie? We'll find out how it all turns out. Actually, I want to just point out one thing. It is not clear what class Manek and Mathilde are. They live on what seems to be a farm, but her aunt and uncle never work except raking the gravel. And it's not at all clear what
Well,
they.
also, it is told that Matilda has some sort of large enough inheritance that is what she lives on.
Yeah, it could be what they live on,
to financially
too.
support her.
Yeah, I mean, she certainly has a lawyer, a personal
Yeah.
lawyer who takes care of all
They
the
have
funds.
so much food.
Yeah, they have a lot of food.
Also, like, well, when we first started watching the movie, like, when it was, like, telling her backstory, like, oh, yeah, her parents died. And then, like, showed her uncle, like, looking kind of poor. And then, like, but then her uncle, like, adopted her. And then he, like, looked clean and, like, middle class.
I hadn't noticed that, but that's interesting. I mean, he does drive a car, which in 1920
That's rare.
is significant. I mean, it's not unheard
Do his
of,
aunt and
but
uncle have any other, or her aunt and uncle have any other kids?
doesn't sound like it. It does not sound like they have any kids. So why?
I like the fact that the car is yellow because I know that like during that time period the Model, or I don't know if that's a Model T, but a lot of cars weren't painted black until like the later 30s and stuff. So I thought that was a good attention to detail.
Yeah, I would guess it. I mean, it might be a Model T. Although I doubt it because Henry Ford has the famous quote, "I'll make a car any color you want as long as it's black."
Maybe they painted it yellow.
Yeah, so it, I mean, it could very well be. There were other European car brands, and there, you know. So
Also, if you can hire a private investigator, you got money.
yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. So yeah, I guess as everybody said, the money is from the settlement for her parents' death. Maybe it was a settlement from the city or the bus company or whatever.
Oh yeah, because they were like,
life insurance or
yeah, ran horrifically killed.
It had life insurance back then?
yeah.
Cool.
The few photos they showed of her parents, they also looked fairly well off too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
I feel like what the background looked like, it was like super fancy, and
Mhm.
the mom was wearing this
I'm also kind of intrigued. Which do you think her aunt or her uncle is the one who's the sibling of one of her?
Well, yeah,
parents?
because that could affect it. Because if it's like the sisters or aunt, like this mom is like sister with one of the aunt and uncle, like she could have married into a like
more money.
more money, and so her family is still quite
Yeah.
like financially below her. But like if it was the son,
Yeah,
you would expect them at the time to have
it
more
would be about the same.
financial parity. Yeah.
How did her parents die again? I feel like that was a little bit vague. Like I knew it was a car crash of some kind. Or like
They were on a bus and it went over the edge of a bridge.
Mhm.
Not car, vehicle crash of some
Yeah,
kind.
yeah. It was a bus that went over the edge of a bridge.
Which
It
is
had just a brief shot of it.
Insane way to kill the mom.
I think it's her uncle because we like see him more throughout the movie,
Mhm.
and also
Yeah.
he gives like more fatherly guidance, whereas we see the auntie like every now and then. She's just like, oh dear, you've got this.
Mhm.
Like, don't really care what she doing, like she traveling and all this stuff. And the auntie's just like, okay dear, have a good time. And uncle's like, are you sure you want to go out there?
Yeah, I think you're onto something that she's much closer to the uncle.
Well, and
Like-
it also is part of, I think, connects to the inverting of the gender roles
Okay.
too, because like as a girl, she should like be close to her mother and like learning her mother, like from her mother and stuff. But
She doesn't
She's-
seem to cope
has a
well.
good, much stronger relationship with her like father figure, and also is behaving much more as a man in the world.
And it's a subtle thing, but she's happy to talk. Like when she wanted to talk to the detective, she took him out in the rain to the shed to talk to him. And when mom showed up, she's like, "Get out of here!" But then later, she's happy to have dad talking to him. Uncle. So she seems to be much more intimate with him than.
Maybe maybe that was like her grandparents' farm, and then the uncle was like
Inherited.
inherited it, so he stayed there, and then the mom went off.
Yeah,
Like,
could be.
and married, and some guy inherited a lot of money. He
Yeah.
died.
There is a whole second CD I've never watched, which is the making of this movie. So you guys should watch that. Tell me about the Darrow reading.
Nurses.
Nurses. Yes.
It's so interesting that the Madonna Virgin like dichotomy with women persists into even nursing, and we're all
Yes.
in a war.
There's
Yeah.
such a saint-hole dichotomy going
Yeah.
on. There's like
Oh, absolutely.
good nurses, bad nurses, saintly nurses, poor nurses.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like they're
Absolutely.
not even trying to be subtle.
And like again with the theme of just like this idea that nursing and like what they did is like completely insignificant.
Yeah. Well, there's such a big idea in the culture that women are supporting roles.
Well, yeah,
You
the
can't-
the point that was really interesting was that like the service soldiers were doing was a service to the nation, but the nurses were only ever doing service to the individual soldiers that
Yeah.
they were
Right.
taking care of.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of-
As I was reading this, I was like, I hadn't really like internalized that nursing is now like from the field profession, it's considered like one of the things. Like, yeah, that's fine if a woman's that, doesn't really matter. It's like still people are still like, oh, I'm a nurse. Now I'm like a male nurse. It's weird. I was like, oh, nurses are still really sexualized to a weird degree. I was like, oh, I haven't thought about that. I was like, that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Kind of going off of Kylie's point, like, this is a little bit random, but like if you see like nurse costumes in Halloween stores, like they're always so sexualized.
Well, every
and
female
so-
costume in
well,
the
yeah,
is sexualized.
But like the nurse costumes are just like all sexual and just like the actual nurse outfits are based on nuns.
Yes,
Happens
exactly.
to be exactly the opposite of that.
Exactly.
I thought it was really interesting that they talked about how they chose white to make them look more saintly, even though white is objectively
The worst
the
color.
worst color you can have to wear as a nurse because you're getting bled on, vomited. Like
The gruesomeness is
Yeah.
just so apparent. Like
Yeah,
And-
19th century doctors always wore black for a reason. Because they would get blood all over everything, and black hid it. But, yeah, any other thoughts on
I was
that?
interested.
Oh, Sydney had her hand up there.
On page 134, the author talks about how women's nursing was simply instinctive, a mother's care for her son.
Mm-hmm.
So like none of the training or the certificates that these women had to go through to take care of people. Oh, it's just nothing because they're just women and they're motherly, so they know how to do it.
And they actually, I mean, she talked about the fact that one of the novels where they had this sort of juxtaposition between the woman who had all the certificates and the education but didn't know how to be a good nurse, and the one who had no education but she was so loving and caring that she was a better nurse, and it's just all instinctive.
Well, and they also like weren't really trained for the injuries that they were seeing. Like they were trained like for gunshot wounds and stuff, but then like people would come in with like their faces blown off.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing that you really have to keep in mind. You sort of saw a glimpse of this in All Quiet on the Western Front. Is medicine sucked in World War I. They did not have antibiotics yet. They had sulfa, which was something you could pour on a wound that would help deter bacterial growth, but they did not have internal antibiotics. So if you got gangrene, you were done, unless they cut your limb off. And so basically the treatment for everything on a limb, they just cut the limb off. And the rest of it, they just sort of bandage it up and hope you survive. I mean,
yeah, it was so telling that like the only things that like the only like medical things that were really mentioned was that like the morphine and the blood. Like they were giving people more blood because they were losing so much, and like but the only drug they were really using were anesthetics. Like to either like dull people out so they're not in screaming agony, or to like
surgery
to knock them out, to do surgery on them. So like it's like kind of crazy the idea like, and like the quickness with which it turns from like we're sitting here, we're ready for like these men are gonna come in, they're gonna have bullet wounds, we're gonna have to be patching, dressing them up, and then you like actually see like thinking of the movies like the wounds these people were suffering, and talking about like, and then I think about like imagine what craziness that happened once like these chemical weapons and like the gases and mustard gas, like those like how do they even handle wounds once those wounds start showing up? Like they couldn't have been prepared for what they're doing.
No, absolutely not. And I mean the gas produced blindness all the time. I mean there are dozens and dozens and dozens of pictures of 12 soldiers in a row with their eyes bandaged up, with their hands on each other's shoulders, being shuffling towards the rear because they're all blind from gas, and they have nothing. They have nothing that they can do about that.
The fact that like the mechanization of war created like all this absolute like horrific stuff, but like if you were like injured and your nerve endings were gone, like that's one like thing, but like to everybody around them having to witness that, and like the nurses like, from this reading that were like shoved to the sideline in like popular memory of the wars had to witness this constantly. Like I'm sure there was like tons of just like unable to like save someone and just like yells over that. So like it's just like everything about it.
Well, yeah, and I mean, stomach wounds without antibiotics, stomach wounds meant 2 or 3 weeks of absolute agony, dying slowly, and the nurses had to be there for all of that,
Well, it was interesting how like they described like in the actual nurse, like the novels nurses wrote about their experience, like the focus was not so much on like the good nurse versus bad nurse dichotomy, but like it was like them trying to like kind of, as the soldiers, they communicate their experience. But like what struck me that they were pointing out too was like how like couldn't women for some reason, or these nurses couldn't like do it. So they'd be at one moment talking about like the glory, like these glorious soldiers who fought so bravely and like got injured and were dying, and then like they would actually describe what they were doing, but like they couldn't like connect. There was like this disconnect between like the glorious descriptions of war they were providing with like the actual evidence they had to what was happening. Being so like clear, like a psychological horror film.
Well, and then later on in the passage, they go on to talk about how, like, if you were the nurse assigned to work in the surgery room, you were standing in that surgery room knocking people out all day long. You could do up to 20 people in a day. And I just think about like how, like, why they put all the regulations on nursing now, like you can only see X amount of patients in an amount of time, and how that must have been like absolutely horrible, just day in, day out. I'm gonna stand in surgery room for 10 hours and have 20 people through losing a leg.
The French also negatively depicted women of means opening up hospitals. They were like, oh, they're just trying to steal glory, but like they were just trying to help out their country.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a phrase that they use there that I should probably. This book, she doesn't translate it. She uses French terms all over the place. Mondaine, it can mean a bunch of things, but le monde just means the world, but it also means high society. So, like, I mean, maybe the best way to, you could translate this as the high society woman, or maybe, you know, a member of the beautiful people, or, you know, I mean, we just had the Met Gala. These are the people who show up at the Met Gala, you know. So it's a really loaded term. It's got all sorts of, you know, connotations about it, and that's probably why she didn't try to translate it, because it had so many connotations that you can't do it. But there's actually, I'm kind of intrigued. You know, we're in a moment. This is a total tangent. You don't have to pay attention. We're in a total moment where language translators are getting better and better and better, right? I mean, I'm clearing out my office upstairs, and I'm like going to throw away all my foreign language dictionaries because I'm like, my phone does it better, right? But there's still, translation is an art. I remember I was in France in the 90s, and I needed to go to a Spanish archive, and so I had this letter. To get into an archive, you need a letter of introduction from a reputable university. So I had a letter from my university in English and French saying that I could go to the archives. I'm a serious historical researcher. I'm not some crank. But I had to go to a Spanish archive, and so I needed it in Spanish. So I called up some translation service in Paris, and the guy said, great, you know, send me the letter. So I dropped it off. He says, come back in a couple days. And I come back, and he says, okay, it's 50 francs, but I will give it to you for free if you can help me with 3 or 4 translations. I was like, okay. And he told me he'd gone to college. He's French, but he'd gone to college at USC and, you know, spoke English fluently. But he's like, I just don't know what the heck. I'm translating this novel for somebody, and I don't know what this is. And he's like, what's a third string wide receiver?
Yeah, that's a.
And then so I'm like, okay, well,
translate.
it's football. He's like, well, I don't know anything about American football. So I'm like, well, you know, they're the tall, skinny guys who are supposed to run really fast, but if you're third string, you're not very good, so you probably can't run very fast, but you're still tall and skinny, so you're probably a geek. And he's like, oh, okay. That's not going to translate. And he's like, what's a snow angel? And I'm like, so I explained that. He's like, that's not going to translate. There's like 5 other things he had. He was just like, that's not going to translate. But so, I mean, historians tend to get lazy like that. They're just like, well, this word is loaded. I'm not even going to try to translate. I'm just going to leave it in French or German or whatever.
It used to be so weird having learned like both languages in like a similar time. So it's just something I come across and I'm like, I know what that means, but how do I put this in one language or the other?
Yeah, and often, I mean, there's a word in a foreign language and it means this word in English and that word in English. And how do you translate it to get both connotations are there in the, you know, they might even be making a pun using both meanings. And how do you capture that? You can't, you know. Why?
I think there's a word in Greek that means, like, it roughly translates to there's trouble in the gypsy village, which is just the most, it says so much about that culture that I need a word for that.
Yeah, and how would you possibly translate something like that? Yeah. Actually, one of my hobbies is trying to translate French idioms into English. Like, what's the American counterpart? And I mean, there's a French one, "Au nuit tous les chats sont gris," which is "at night all cats are gray." I'm like, I know what that means.
Idioms are so culturally specific,
Yeah.
so it's like.
But usually you can come up with another
Yeah, like a
idiom
metaphor, another idiom.
that's often totally unrelated, but they convey the same meaning. And, you know, I mean, in English we have like any port in a storm, but that's not quite the same as at night all cats are gray.
I've heard at night all cats are black, so.
Oh, really? You've heard that in English? Wow. I'd never heard anything like that. Oh, that's cool. Huh.